So when my father went to school, first grade for the first time, it didn't work out too well. He was not a good student, frankly speaking, and they held him back on second grade. And they were going to hold him back again for a third, to take second grade a third time. And this was tough. He struggled with school. And at that point, Grammy had joined a new church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and they had a little school. And so they met with the teacher, and the teacher met with Dad as a boy, and she said, if you will try really hard, you can come into my class as a third grader, which is what happened. And Dad thrived in that Seventh-day Adventist Christian school, that little school. It made the difference for him. And throughout his life, he believed in Seventh-day Adventist Christian education. He went all the way through the elementary school. He went to Mount Vernon Academy, and eventually there were issues. He was not perfect student there, but in fact, he got expelled. Frankly speaking, I'll tell you that. He was expelled. He had snuck out to play pool, and he tells the story of lining up the shot and looking over his shoulder and seeing the dean right behind his shoulder. They were on to him all along. He was expelled, but he didn't want to go to public school. He followed his best friend, the pastor's son, to Southern Missionary College. Joe Spicer was starting Southern Missionary College, and he enrolled at Tacoma Park Academy, our Adventist school there. That was a hard year for my dad. It was not really, but he didn't want to go to public school. And after that, he came back and he asked the principal of Mount Vernon Academy if he could come back, and he let my dad come back and graduate in the class with his class of 1950 from Mount Vernon Academy. My dad believed in Christian education. Anyway, shortly after that, after he graduated, he got a letter from his uncle, Uncle Sam, and was informing him that he had been selected to serve in the Army. And at the time, there was a war going on. I'm calling it a war. Nobody wanted to call it a war, but it was a war in Korea. So my dad would not shirk his civic duty to be a soldier, but he could not bring himself to think about killing another human being, even an enemy. So he came in as a conscientious objector and served in the medical branch. This was not necessarily a popular thing in the Army. I met a man who, later in life, who was a veteran in Korea, from Korean War. And we were talking about the experiences. And he mentioned that, none of the conscientious objectors ever had to serve combat. It was just an excuse to get out of combat duty. That wasn't what happened with my dad. I don't know how common it is. Maybe he may have been the only one, for all I know, that actually served in combat as a conscientious, unarmed objector. But that's what he did. He went to Korea. He was initially signed at the hospital in Seoul as an orderly. He served there where he met a Seventh-day Adventist doctor officer. I don't know if it was a lieutenant or a captain, but he was serving there too, and they became friends, and this officer had been assigned a Jeep. And so he invited my dad, why don't you be my chauffeur? You can drive the Jeep. So now he's a Jeep driver for this officer. And one day the officer said, I'm spending all my time here in the hospital, and I kind of like to at least say I went out to see, what it looked like out on the front. So they wanted to go to the front lines. And so Dad drove the Jeep, and they were driving out, trying to find the front lines. And they came across some GIs that were on foot, and they asked directions. And the officer said, well, we wanted to go to the front lines. Do you know how to get there? He said, oh, you're there. You're already there. And by the way, the enemy position is right over that hill right there. And that's where they have their artillery. And so the officer said, okay, well, thank you for that information. And then he got back in the car, and he told my dad, let's get the hell out of here. Which is not a word my dad used, and I don't know. But that he told me that's what he was told. And so they were on their way, going back. And all along the way, this officer saying, can't you hurry up, speed up a little bit? Whatever those soldiers told him apparently spooked that officer. And so my dad was driving the Jeep as fast as he could, and he hit a pothole, and he broke the axle. Or he broke something on the Jeep that pretty much ruined the Jeep. They were able to get back okay, but that is a really bad thing to do in the Army, to break government equipment, government material. It's potentially, unless you have a good reason. And this doctor who apparently he had a reason, or he was able to explain a reason. And so they weren't court-martialed. They didn't have any, I don't want to ramble. But in any case, there was consequences. The officer lost his Jeep privileges, and Dad got sent to the front line. He was right on the line in the sandbag bunkers when they're being shelled by the enemy, artillery shelled by the enemy. He was going out on patrols in the night into no man's land. They were engaging the enemy in firefights. What was my dad doing there? He was patching up his wounded comrades who were shot, and he was carrying them back. And hideous thing. And that's how my dad explained. It was so traumatic and so hideous, but he did it, and he had these experiences. He didn't talk about them very much, but he told me some of these stories where he was just trying to patch up his friends who were bleeding and open wounds and trying to get them back to save their life. And all these firefights, he never actually saw the enemy. He just heard, they were shooting at him. To go out into out there into no man's land and know people are going to try to kill you and shoot you, what that is like. If it's a necessity, it's a really barbaric necessity. And, I want to just give my appreciation for those young men who answer the call of duty to serve in our military. We have 2 here now, and I just want to thank you for that, because it's no kidding commitment. But anyway, my father, he had one story in particular. On a night patrol, he was helping a wounded wounded soldier back, and got separated from his patrol, and was trying to find his way back at night by himself with his helping the soldier back. And he could see people in the dark, shadows in the dark walking by. And, he didn't know. He didn't know if they were his patrol or the enemy or who they were. But he managed to get back okay. Years later, he believed in his heart those were angels watching over him. That's what he really believed. He didn't know who they were at the time. Anyway, that was his service. He didn't get wounded. He didn't have a Purple Heart. He didn't have any medals of honor or anything like that. What he got was he got to go home. And that was what he really appreciated that. That was the most important part of what he got out of his service. And going back home, because now he has the VA benefits, he was able to go on to college. And of course, he wanted to go to our Adventist college in Washington, D.C., the Washington Missionary College. Renamed many times now, it's still there as Washington Adventist University. But at the time he went there, it was the Washington Missionary College. He went there and he wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to continue on to be a teacher as a Adventist teacher in a Christian school in our education system. And that was his what he wanted to do. When he was there, his sisters, some of his sisters were there too, and they knew a young lady who was going to school at Washington Missionary College. Her name was Sammy Farrell, and they introduced their friend Sammy to their brother, my dad, and that was my mom, Sammy, now you know as Sammy Cerovski. And I think they were married only 3 months. 3 months after they first got met. 3 months after they met, they were married. And my mom, later on, she talked to me. She said, that seems so irresponsible to me when I was an adult. But, it worked for them. It worked for them. And how do you know you're going to find the right person